Welcome to the Elevated Frequency Podcast, where we explore the unseen patterns shaping our health, our choices, and our evolution. And more importantly, how to reclaim your power through embodied living. I'm Shannon Morse, co founder of The Green Door Life, and today I'm sitting down with my incredible co founder, coach, and sister in strength, Lisa Kirby. In this episode, we're pulling back the curtain on what strength training really looks like when it's rooted in alignment, breath, and nervous system awareness. We'll be diving into our personal stories from Pilates, Muay Thai, and rock climbing to old school gym culture and the injuries that woke us up so you can understand why we created Awaken Your Strength and how it's transforming bodies and beliefs from the inside out. Whether you're brand new to lifting or ready to break free from the no pain, no gain mentality, this conversation is your invitation to rewire your relationship with your body and discover the kind of strength that lasts a lifetime. Let's drop in. So, Lisa, as we discussed, I'm going to parry it to you to start the conversation. So let's go.
I love this. I get to ask the questions. I'm so honored and excited because I know on the inside how transformative this is. And it's almost like when you get into this level of detail and knowledge that you have around strength training, I get to be the novice. I get to be the student, which I love, actually. It's very refreshing. And I'm like, the more I learn from you, the more I'm like, I don't know anything. And I've been lifting for 25 years. That's what I'm like. I'm so excited to pick your brain here and learn more. So, without further ado, Shannon, so you've trained in everything, like as we were just talking about, from Pilates to Muay Thai, even Jiu-Jitsu, which I've seen a snippet of and it looks fantastic and very enticing, to rock climbing, and how I first saw you, single point trapeze. It was just like, who is this Aquarius, multifaceted woman? In your experience, when you kind of reflect on all of those modalities and your experience with different kinds of training, how have those movement experiences shaped the way you think about strength training in particular today?
Thank you. I love this. So, Pilates was my first love, and it's really hard to say that that hasn't been the most instrumental in how I think about strength. And I was introduced to Pilates because I was in a really bad car accident and I shattered the window with my head. And therefore, I had limited movement of my cervical spine. So I was unaware that I had compressed my cervical spine. And I want to say 16, but I might have been like on the edge of 17. I can't really remember. And I had two concussions actually that spanned the course of 2 years that were pretty severe. And as a part of my physical therapy, I was sent to a chiropractor and also a Pilates instructor. And the Pilates was very new. I had never heard of it before. Like my dad had always taken me to yoga, so I knew what yoga was, but I didn't know what Pilates was. And I was like astounded at how the smallest movements that were so intentional could make the biggest difference in the way that my body was to be able to repattern its movement again. Like it was really wild. And I had done like a little bit of strength training at that time, but I didn't know a ton. Definitely wasn't certified in anything. So I would say that moving through that experience, seeing how like just small shifts make such a big difference, led me to go, what is this Pilates thing? And then I decided to go through a year of training for really focusing on physical therapy. And that was kind of what set off my strength like adventure, and my movement adventure was really from that experience. And then just things kept happening, but that definitely is the foundation and the root and the lens that I look at strength through, which I think is a little unique for most individuals that you'll find like, doing deadlifts and squats in the gym.
That makes so much sense. I didn't know about the car accident. I think I knew about the other incident that led to the concussion, but that just it makes so much sense. And now I see now the intention infused into the strength training. I actually had an application call today with a potential client, and she was asking me like, "Oh, like what are your workouts like?" And I'm like, "Well, how much time do you have? Let me tell you." But one of the striking characteristics is that intention And you're not just, I feel like there's a time and a place for, how many reps can you do in this set of time? But if you're always doing AMRAP and you're
Mhm.
always like, how fast can you do this movement? That yields such a different results than really like getting intentional about acting specific movers and muscles, and especially the small ones. And the way I describe it, I always say you have your background in Pilates, and then that knowledge is integrated in every single workout we do. You're
Mhm.
not deadlifting without thinking about your breath. You're not doing squats without thinking about how's your core involved. And I'm like,
Mhm.
what a gift to us as the trainees, because now we all have shredded six packs, etc., and like weird muscles. My favorite thing to do is to take pictures of my body parts and be like, Shannon, what is this? Like, what is happening to me? And she's like, yep, that's your serratus
Your
interior.
serratus interior, or otherwise known as your tiger claws. I love it.
It's so good.
Yeah.
Like waking up on Christmas morning, like what new muscle that was like dormant, And from this, like you're saying, the smallest intentional micro movements can bring something to the surface and activate.
Yes.
Very.
And that was one of the things that I realized when I was in personal training that was probably one of the bigger differences that I was beginning to notice is that I would cue my clients through from foot to head.
Mhm.
And then I would ask them to repeat it back to me. And I never heard any other trainer doing that.
Wow.
And it was kind of shocking to me just to hear trainers counting and perhaps like putting their hand and spotting, but never actually leading joint by joint, muscle by muscle through what should intentionally be contracting here. And then having the individual repeat it back. So they were building their own internal vocabulary and script for their own body.
Wow. That is I'm almost thinking of like NLP, like the neuro linguistic programming, so that you're saying it verbally and while your body's going through the motion, and then you're just going to start doing it naturally over time.
Exactly. And what's really cool, what's been cool about the Green Door and our group strength programs, and where we do it virtually and through Zoom, is that for our instructors who understand this about our programming, we will learn that every individual, just like in life, will have a certain cue that will land for them in their own body where they will be able to say it back to themselves. Like for some individuals, pull your shoulders back doesn't mean anything.
Right.
They will be like, is that it? But if you say, imagine that someone is holding your shoulders back, they will be like, that's what you meant? Okay, I got it. Essentially it's the same thing, but everyone needs their own unique cue. And so we get to learn that, and that becomes specific, just like we look through filters in life.
I'm holding back from sharing some of the wildly um, possibly inappropriate, cues that I'm thinking about over time that I've heard from other trainers. Some of the classics of there's a credit card between a pair of cheeks, little things like that. But like those worked for me, and it was
Mhm.
hilarious. Have you ever noticed people coming into the program with cues from trainers or just past experiences that were unhelpful? Like for mine has always been sit in your heels, like put all your weight in your heels for squats, deadlifts, like I'm still undoing that 25 years later.
That is a big one, because on one hand, it's not wrong, but what happens when you sit in your heels without remembering that you need to have your toes on the ground, right? It's like it's half true. So we need to sit into our heels. We can have, maybe that's not even the correct term, but for some people that's going to bring them from like more shifting their knees over their toes to moving their weight back into their heels. However, most of us who sit into our heels will automatically lift our toes up to overcompensate for what we think is sitting in our heels or not sitting in our heels. So That was the first thing that came to mind, Lisa. I did the same thing in the beginning when I was learning how to squat appropriately, like 2 years into my personal training certification journey. And I had shin splints because of how hard I was pulling my toes up. So
Wow.
I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. And no one at that point, like even in going through what's really wild and what I love about strength is that there is always something to learn. Always, always,
Yep.
always, always. It's like with life. Every time you realize one thing about your body, it unlocks something else that now your body's ready to show you it can be aligned or corrected into. So I remember doing that and all of a sudden going like, okay, well, shoot, now I have shin splints, and then realizing, oh, I actually have to push my toes down into the ground and think about a cross directional pressure from my big toe to my heel. And that's actually what it's supposed to feel like so that all of my muscles can turn on in my feet, which then relays to every other muscle that stacks on top of it. Just going, wow. So it's that one.
Yes. And that level of nuance and detail, I love so much because we've been working on that for certain exercises as a group in our community. And
Mm-hmm.
just, for example, for deadlifts, I remember that cue of like, okay, focus your kind of weight in your feet in the midfoot. And like that
Mm-hmm.
alone has been mind blowing to me because now I'm like, whoa, all of a sudden my hamstrings are activated. These are the little things that, I think about before when I wasn't seeing the results that I was looking for, of like just kind of going through the motions as best as I thought that I could, to
Mm-hmm.
now being so specific and intentional and really seeing the change that I wanted. I mean, that alone is just solid gold. And, some of those things, and that kind of leads me into my next question. I'm so excited for Awaken Your Strength that people don't know the level of detail and nuance that you're going to go into. And I'm like, I do. And it's like little things like that can be such a game changer for sculpting and defining your muscles to the next level. So, when you think about the overall program of Awaken Your Strength, what, especially because we're training, as a community already, what really inspired you to create this dedicated deep dive program, Awaken Your Strength? And also, what gap were you seeing in the fitness industry that this program specifically is going to kind of fill?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay. Two-part question. It kind of sounds like, well, one, you and I are always seeing ways in which we're supporting individuals with education, whether it's hormones or quantum biology, circadian health, strength, mobility, flexibility. And then you and I are always looking at it and seeing that once we fill in one gap, another gap appears. Right. And so it's just like the nature, it's almost like whack a mole.
Yes.
We're like, wait a second. So now that we have this really awesome all access pass, we have a virtual wellness studio where we're doing our progressive strength training. The mind will always or still choose the path of least resistance. So some of our members who have been doing that for a period of time, even though they are getting these well crafted and very intentional progressive training programs, they may not be aware of where they are falling into path of least resistance, where they are sticking with the same weight, where they actually need to progress, where their body is choosing the same movement patterns and they're not giving themselves an opportunity to find a slight alternative that will actually yield more results. And they may not have the information to be truly connected into the why and the how for their unique body. So I see some of our members having incredible results. And then I see some of our members reaching a plateau that isn't actually necessary. And
Mm.
so, really helping them to go, well, you've reached that because the information that you've had up until this point allowed you to get to this place now. And now you get to take the foundation that you've built, wonderful foundation, and bring apart or on top of it this new information that you're now ready to carry, actually, so that
Yeah.
you can integrate that into the experience. And as a very simple example, this morning in our women's group call, I was sharing with our group, we're in week 10, that I wanted them to remember that muscles actually grow at rest and not when you're training. And some of the women's faces were like, what?
Yeah.
Because we don't really think of it like that, right? We think about, okay, this is my dedicated time. I have an hour. This is when everything's happening. But that's actually not the case at all. And oh my gosh, I can think of so many things in life that are like this. It's like planting a seed, right? You plant it and you put the soil over it, but that's not where all the growth is happening. That's like the first step, right?
Yeah.
So when we don't understand that, we could very well go, okay, I'm going to strength train every day then, because obviously that's where it's going to pay off for me.
Mm.
But yet that's actually not what happens. We have to be so intentional about when we're doing the thing, and then be so intentional about the time period of rest, right? So that's just one layer that when we're not aware of that, we could be banging our head against the wall because we don't have just this one little piece of information, and turning that key will unlock a whole new experience for the body. And most of us have enough information to get to a certain place and or to be just dangerous enough to keep
Right.
us at a plateau within ourselves.
Oh gosh, it's like now, and it's funny because I hear it not just with myself, but our clients are, I've heard from some of our clients, they're like, it's so hard to go to a public gym and they're seeing other people training and they're just like, because they want to walk over and be like, tuck your chin. Because you see these people like cranking their necks as they're going down into a deadlift. And all I can see is like, I want to help you, but also I don't want to be that person at the gym giving unsolicited, form advice. But
Yeah.
that's that double-edged sword, right? Strength training, especially for women, is very popular now, which yes, this is
Mhm.
great. We love this.
Yes.
And it's so important to get that foundational training in and make sure that you're doing it, getting the most bang for your buck, if you will. It's like, is it, are you doing it effectively? Do you have an actual program
Mhm.
instead of just bouncing around? Are you doing it in a way that is safe for your spine? Because when you
Mhm.
really start thinking about adding load, increasing your weight over time, you need to be careful, not to
Mhm.
scare anyone, but just you want to be mindful that you're doing it with proper form and safety. So,
Absolutely. And I think what's interesting is that most individuals who have like chronic back pain is like a big one, right? They're scared to go into the gym and lift weights because they're scared that they're going to reactivate a lower back pain or something like that, an injury. And for those individuals, what I want to say for you guys is that it's not necessary for you to live your life like that. It's actually very simple. It's a simple path. It's a fundamental path to correct chronic low back pain. And the way that we do that is looking at the two muscles that correct and engage and lengthen in order to hold the pelvis and the spine in the position that it's meant to be held in. So that's one of the things. It's like a lot of us will be coming in with preconceived notions that saying like, well, this has happened to my body. And I can tell you from being in multiple car accidents with severe concussions that limited the movement of many parts of my spine, that that is not the end all be all.
yeah.
One of my favorite clients, Margaret, if you can hear me, uh, you are one of my favorites. So I do have favorites, evidently. We worked together for a little over 10 years. And when she first came in, she had severe scoliosis. When she sat, it would be an S curve. And her and I have spoken about it. We've reflected on it now. Now she sits down in a straight line. You guys, that is amazing. Amazing. It's the body is so resilient.
Yeah.
So that's another thing. It's like there's so many kind of beliefs that are trying to keep us safe for good reason. And there is also a really gentle and sustainable and enjoyable path to be injury free, to be strong, and also to really know how your body wants to move because it's all different for all of us, and we get to explore that together. It's very cool.
Yeah. I think we, definitely our clients and us as coaches and co-founders were not really satisfied with the status quo of, oh, you just age and you dilapidate and you lose energy and pain is a daily thing. We're like, I I just don't accept or believe that. And then we're now living proof that it doesn't have to be that way. If you
Mhm.
really have that foundational knowledge of how to care, it's really caring for your body. When you're thinking about how our training style is different, and we kind of talked about this with the infusion of the Pilates aspect,
Mhm.
what else do you feel like makes our specific programming and training different that most programs might be missing?
Yeah. So it's hard. Like there are so many amazing programs out there. I'm going to talk about two things. I'm going to talk about the All Access Pass. I'm going to talk about Awaken Your Strength. So the way that we program in our progressive training and All Access Pass, it's incredibly intentional. There is nothing that there is there by accident. And those individuals who go through Awaken Your Strength will learn exactly the formula for how we program and why we program in such a way. I'm going to be breaking it down. Everything from why we start with certain mobilization and activation exercises, which is one of the things that will be unique for us. The way we're doing all of it is preparing the body for activation, mind muscle connection, mobilization in order to carry load. And then once we move into activating the body in such a way which prevents injury, right? Then we move into carrying load, and we're working to both tackle a couple of things. One is being the most efficient with our time. Nobody has like 2 hours to be strength training these days. I mean, some people do, but it's not most of us. And so we want to be as most efficient as we can. And within that efficiency, we want to have a certain amount of load on the muscles that we are looking to activate. But there's also like an equation for muscle growth and strength for the amount of sets and reps that actually produce muscle building over the course of a week's time. So we're also putting that into the equation. So that's another layer that's in there that may not always be a factor when you're looking at some of these classes. Like, I'm just throwing a bunch out: F45, Orange Theory, Bears Bootcamp, Core Power. If you're just kind of dropping into a class like that, you may not be actually working with the science of how to get stronger or mobilize that is available for us. Like, there is actually true metrics that we can track when we are applying a certain amount of force, a certain amount of consistency in the muscle, and then time under tension and rest. And so there is literally an algorithm, just like there is for macronutrients, right? And then we add the layer that everyone's body's different. We all have different body types. So our bodies will respond in a different way. It will require different rest. It will require different frequency of training, different types of training and load. Like, there's so much.
Yeah. And even just the metabolic impact of some of those classes. I was actually talking about this again today with the lovely woman I was speaking to, that she was finding when she would participate in some of these high intensity classes, even though they touted themselves and marketed themselves as we're lifting weights,
Yes.
she would be starving afterward
Mm-hmm.
and doesn't have the nutrition component dialed in yet. So she was doing these classes and then feeling so hungry and just so depleted and just like eating the whole kitchen that she actually gained weight. And then
Mm-hmm.
she started to feel like really puffy over time, not sculpted. And
Mm-hmm.
so, is there a difference in terms of kind of like that intensity of some workouts and classes being very like cardiovascularly focused, even if they're using weights,
Yeah.
versus like progressive strength training with the goal of like developing actual muscle mass?
Oh my
I know.
gosh.
How much time do we
I know,
have?
exactly. I was like, okay, let me try to keep this succinct. When you're experiencing, or when anyone's experiencing that kind of physiological response, I feel like it happens in either two places. It's the nervous system that's responding. So it's responding with a heightened cortisol response. And I personally experience that type of cortisol response either when I am lifting really heavy, like lifting 1 to 5 reps, really taxing the central nervous system. It has to do all of this work to produce maximum power, maximum effort, right? You are really, really taxing the system. This other one that you're talking about right now is you're essentially in this high metabolic phase, this high heart rate stage. And in that phase, you are chronically releasing cortisol. And for most women, if those women are able to have like a full 3 hour rest afterwards, they're able to go home and have a bath and like play with their puppy and, just calm down their heart rate and move into a parasympathetic nervous system state, they would likely do quite well. But that's not what the majority of women are doing. No, the majority of women, especially who are generally going and doing those classes, and I'm generalizing here. So if it doesn't totally resonate with if you guys are listening, fine. If it does resonate, you might double think why you're taking that class. So if you are already operating in a wired and tired state, then you are going to be already operating with a heightened cortisol release. And then you're going to be in one of those classes and you are compounding the chronic cortisol state that you're in. So not only will you just be riding this high cortisol wave, by the way, cortisol is not bad. We need cortisol to be alert, to be awake. Lisa talks about this. You talk about it so much in Awaken Your Cycles. And it's such a big factor in balancing and regulating our hormones. But when cortisol is released in this chronic state with this type of training, it can absolutely cause us to feel ravenous, cause us to feel incredibly tired, and really have this blood sugar up and down, up and down, up and down, especially if people don't know how to fuel around it. And they're not aware of the amount of rest that's required in order to bring them back into a blood sugar and nervous system regulated state. So, not to say that it's bad, but it requires the rest in order to recover, which most individuals, like nobody is talking about that.
No, not at all. And I think the psychology behind it, especially in the US, is kind of like, oh, we'll just go harder, faster, stronger, heavier, more intense.
Yes.
Which, in theory, yes, we need some sort of progression to advance. But I think for women's physiology, it's just a little bit more nuance and knowledge needs to come into play because we just have that dance of we need to stay in the Goldilocks zone, right? Not overdoing it really with anything, or underdoing it. That's the other side of like not pushing enough.
Yeah.
So in our experience, myself personally, and then also with our clients, we've gotten to see it firsthand, how that shifts. And then when they come into our workouts, it's almost like a little bit of an adjustment period mentally where they have to kind of talk themselves through with coaching support of, is this enough? Yes, it's enough. Like, is this workout hard enough? Like, do I need to do more? Can I really just do this and walking? And the result, like the proof is in the pudding, right? I was talking to one of our longer term clients. She's like, I've never done so little with my workouts and seen such maximal results. She's doing strength training 3 times a week and she walks. And
Yep.
she's like, I've been waiting for this moment. And she's still like, I have to pinch myself because how is this possible? And like, that is the gift why we can't stop talking about it and why, I am personally so excited for you to guide everyone through Awaken Your Strength so they get that next level, like you're talking about, of detail and support in this area, just to take, their knowledge and support and really know it from the inside. Because I'm thinking about just the little that you've taught me from when I was teaching classes of thinking about movers and muscles. And I'm like, wow, when you understand how your lat works, you're going to lock everything down. It starts to come from the inside out, which is just a really incredible thing. So more questions from you. I love this game. So from nervous system awareness to movement mechanics to tempo, why do those details matter so much in terms of creating like long-term sustainable strength?
Ooh, I'm trying to think of which one to start with. Nervous system awareness, tempo. What was it? Joint stacking?
Movement mechanics.
Movement mechanics. Ooh. Okay. So I really look at strength training, functional strength training, as geometry. It's lines, right? We're creating angles in which the body will be able to the most effectively carry load. I mean, that's all we're doing. We're like building a house and structure and shapes with our body that can most effectively sustain vertical loading. So when I'm able to think about it like that, which is very mathematical, it's very algorithmic, but that is essentially what is happening. We are working with angles at the joint. And what's cool is that the joint structure is different for everybody, which I mean, that's why like I love strength training. I love Pilates. I love everything that has to do with like movement and muscle anatomy because everyone is so different and everyone's body will produce such a beautifully different result. And that part is so fun when it comes to body composition change and also strength of what's possible for each individual. I think you and I may have talked about this before, but in in the circus community with single point trapeze, it was so obvious to see how certain bodies were going to be much better at certain apparatus based on their arm length, their leg length, the size of their hips, like all of these things. And you would just start to naturally see different body types gravitate towards different apparatus because certain people were going to not be good at that other thing because their body was shaped differently. And that's okay. But they were amazing at this other thing. And you can see that in Olympics, for example, right? You see like all of these body shapes just grouping together and that's where they excel. So everything from joint stacking to nervous system, all of these baby aspects are essentially working from the first layer out, right? Our nervous system is going to be like the first line that we actually get to communicate with. If we are unaware of our nervous system, the way things feel, like the positioning of our toes, that's the communication. The mind muscle connection is our nervous system, it is the communication pathway. So that's essentially like the very first layer. So that's what we're implementing into Awaken Your Strength. Awaken Your Strength is first looking at movement patterns. It's looking at breath. It's looking at mind muscle connection. So you can set that first level. And then we move into the joint stacking, right? So we are going from like nervous system to actually the structural integrity that is underneath your muscles. And then from the muscles, we go into stabilizing the muscle at the joint. So we have certain muscles that are going to be stabilizers, certain ones that are going to be more efficient at strength or bearing load. But we don't want to bear load before the stabilizers know what they're doing. So we're working from the inside out. And that is really how we build the structure. So nervous system, mind muscle connection, joint stacking, structural alignment, and then the breath that allows everything to flow and allows the oxygen and the force production to be created because the breath is really the director of all that stuff as it's happening.
Ooh, I learned something new today. That's amazing, and it makes so much sense. And I can see this now, like in our workouts and our training. And I wonder too, for certain types of people who are drawn to kind of more of these high intensity classes, if you're already kind of in this high cortisol dysregulated state, almost like you could be a little addicted to that state, or it feels like a match, right? When
Yes.
I was doing those classes, I was not the person being like, I want to go to yoga. No, I was like, oh, I want to go do this intense thing.
Yes. Oh my
Where
gosh,
I'm like,
Lisa. Yes.
and I'm like checked out, completely checked out and not in my body. And so one of the things I've always said about the workouts that you've created, they feel like yoga to me. They really do remind me of yoga in terms of the intention and the breath,
Mm-hmm.
but just with weights involved. I'm like, this is the best. It's like a match made in heaven because you're able to slow down, and they don't feel taxing on your nervous system in the same way whatsoever, which is it was so eye-opening for me of like, oh, like I need this.
Mm-hmm.
This is what I need. I don't need to, maybe like once a week or once a month I can like really push it and go for that intensity, but this is home base.
Yes. That is what you just said about like it's a frequency match essentially. It totally like they feel more comfortable in that because they're already operating at that octane. And when we go from that as being our norm or what we associate with like a good workout, right? And then we move into a workout that is more regulated and is asking us to slow down. At first, it can be a little uncomfortable and we can feel like it may not be trustworthy, which is really fascinating. I remember first training with with a personal trainer, and we were doing a trade, and he was a really muscular dude, very good personal trainer. And we trained 2 days a week, and he asked me not to do anything else. I did not obey him. for a while. And then I really had to because of the amount of rest I needed. But he would tell me, especially in the beginning, we would go into do a squat and I would be like, okay, what do I do? Like mountain climbers in the break or what are we doing? And he was like, no, Shannon, you sit and you don't move. And my response, I can tell by your face, my response was, that doesn't like internally, I was like, that feels uncomfortable to just sit and
Yep.
not move and wait and breathe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That tracks so much. I mean, just personally and with so many of our other clients, in thinking about that constant need to move. When you're in that state, I always tell our clients now, I'm like, stress is not an emotion or feeling, it's a state of being, it's a
Yeah.
physiological state of your body. And when you're in it, you don't feel, you're just like in go mode. So you may not even feel that you're there. It's really until you slow down and you're kind of like, whoa, if slowing down feels scary and uncomfortable, like that's something to look at.
Yeah, and hard to look at too, especially if you're so used to just never stopping really, which I think
Yes.
so many people are in that realm, like in that conversation. You've had your own journey through the gym and you kind of moved from like more traditional gyms training. So I'm curious, and I think it would be so cool for you to share what it was like to transition from like the bro style gym training to the Green Door Life's programming.
Well, this is so interesting to reflect on, and it didn't really hit me until recently. I'm like, you are the first female trainer I have ever worked with, which looking back now, I'm like, huh, why didn't I ever, seek out a female trainer? My whole life has really been me surrounded predominantly by men in, personally, professionally, everything. And so I think I just kind of naturally fell into, especially because when I started strength training, the females in the weight room was non-existent.
Mhm.
So I just naturally was like, oh, well, all the trainers are guys. There were no female trainers at the time. So I've always had that history of just finding myself learning from them. And, you know, I really started when I really started learning. I first started by myself. I was in college at UC San Diego, and we had this whole gym area we called the pit, where all the cardio machines were up at the top, and then all the dudes were in the pit lifting heavy weights. And I just was like, why can't I go in here and just walk down with my headphones on and like old school Discman, the sport mode that had the anti skips you could put your CDs in. I'm that old.
Oh my
And
God.
I would go down there and like tuck my Discman in my shorts. And then I had no idea what I was doing. Absolutely no idea. And I was scared out of my mind and I didn't care. I was like, this looks like fun. It looks more interesting. I hated cardio. And so I just started messing around and I found one girlfriend who would do it with me. And we were just kind of looking around at what the guys were doing. I did a lot of isolated movements, and now I look back and it's so funny, Shannon. I'm like, of course I was emulating what the guys were doing. So I had huge traps. I had huge triceps. I refused to work my biceps because I thought that was gross.
Oh,
So looking back at pictures, literally I have no bicep and then I have massive triceps and massive, my traps
traps.
and
Yeah.
everything. I look so weird and out of balance and I just laugh. Of course, they never trained legs. The
Yeah.
guys I saw never trained legs, so I never did either. So that was like where I started. And then I worked at a gym and had my first kind of exposure to training was with an incredible trainer who trains professional athletes, collegiate athletes. And I got to meet these guys, and that training was next level. And
Mm.
from there on, every male trainer I've worked with after that, they saw my kind of drive and pain tolerance where I was like, let's go, I'll do anything. And then the other women that were in their training were like, they didn't want to, they were like, I'm not lifting more than X amount of weights. And I was like, I'm doing what the guys are doing. I don't care. And so they always push me like a guy. And I was like, I will go till I break. You don't know me. And they did. I was working out with chains and like all this weird stuff, like everything that the professional athletes were doing, I would do. For a time, it worked. I just had no idea what I was doing with nutrition. And I was just eating like crazy. I
Mhm.
had literally no idea what I was doing. I was probably under eating protein and I was just constantly hungry. So I didn't necessarily have that reflection of like a fit body. But once I put the pieces together, then I moved into, actually before I got into that, then I got into powerlifting when I was pregnant, and then I fell in love with the barbell, and I was just like, there's something magical about the barbell as a female. I personally feel like where you take your strength to the next level,
Mhm.
and that confidence that you feel walking into a weight room and just like slamming weights on, and I'd like powder up my hands. It's a whole thing, and it's an inner reflection, or it's an outer reflection of the inner strength that I felt, of just like I feel competent, I feel confident, I feel like a badass. And eventually I was like, okay, this is all good and great, and I love being strong, I love knowing my way around the weight room, but the biggest shift for me was meeting you. And you were like, okay, if you train like that, your body's gonna look like this, even with the nutrition component. And I
Mhm.
was like, wait, me doing maxing out on heavy front squats 3 days a week is gonna give me big quads, but I don't want big quads. And you were like, well, why are you doing this? And I'm like, I don't know. This is what I've always known. This is the training I've been given. I would just make up my own workouts at that point. And
Yeah.
so meeting you and learning the sequence, the why behind the training, integrating more glute work, that was
Mhm.
like a huge component that I had neglected, and realizing I was so quad dominant from,
Mhm.
at that point, almost 20 years of heavy, heavy training my quads. I don't know if they will ever dissipate. The muscle memory is there. That shift, to be fully honest, it has taken me years to kind of change my mindset around it. And
Mhm.
I had to surrender. I had to put faith and trust and be like, I'm going to trust Shannon. I'm going to trust her programming. And then it's like every year that it's like compounding results from
Mhm.
following your workouts, from I'm never injured anymore,
Mhm.
ever. Like that alone is mind blowing to me.
Mhm.
And then the physique, the sculpt, and the shape. I'm like, this is what I've been looking for, and I've been killing myself in the gym for so long, and trying to find this like secret sauce of modalities. Oh, maybe I just need to do more cardio on top of all this heavy strength training, from spin classes to boot camps. And here the magic sauce has been, oh, do less and be intentional about it. And that has been, I'm just so grateful, and I won't stop talking about it. Sorry.
Oh, but I'll also like, I love your story, and it's been so fun and rewarding to watch your journey. And your journey is unique. I mean, like the fact that you had that drive to like get in the gym and do all of the crazy things that these guys were doing, that these trainers were doing, like just that is super fun. That's part of your personality, and like the superpower of that personality, like I'm just going to go as hard as I can, is also what you had to rewire, right? To be like, oh, that actually doesn't always benefit me in this particular area. And so I got to dial it back a little bit. But what you're speaking into, I wanted to highlight one aspect, which is like for you doing a ton of front squats, doing a ton of sumo deadlifts and sumo squats, like we had talked about at one point. When you were telling me kind of what you wanted to see differently, and we were talking about the type of movement patterns you were doing, and then I was sharing that those movement patterns were actually compounding what you didn't want anymore. That's another thing that most people don't, when we don't understand the anatomy, when we don't understand what is actually soliciting which muscle to grow and to contract and to stabilize, we don't have access to building the body composition that we're actually looking for. So that is why in Awaken Your Strength, there's anatomy. It's not so that you have to sit there and like learn science, you know, like it's
Yeah.
not so you're like, hey, let's learn some anatomy so you can feel smart. That's not the reason. The reason is so that you can be empowered to understand if you want to strengthen for injury prevention or body composition, or so you can do some cool shit, then you may want to know the anatomy that's going to be pulling the muscle at the joint to pull the lever of your physical structure. And then you get to create it like that. And it gets to be super fun. You know, then you get to be the designer of your own physical vessel and your own experience. Like it's so cool.
Yeah.
But we're not taught this, just like
No.
we're not taught about nutrition. So I think when I was originally thinking about this, and we wrote this, and I started writing this like 5 years ago, and then we didn't release it. And I'm so glad we didn't, because there's been so much growth and shift of what I wanted to infuse into it. But I was like, should this be for trainers? And then I thought to myself, no, everyone has a body.
Right. Yeah.
We're all moving, hopefully, throughout the day. Like, why do we not know this?
Yes. I mean, I think I was telling you recently, I find myself, my posture has improved like crazy, like outside of just our workouts, even just walking around, I'll find myself like
Mm-hmm.
pelvis tucked at times and my
Mm-hmm.
shoulders, from here to like here, roll those
Yeah.
shoulders back and down. You just become so much more aware. And I know this is kind of off topic, but do you see like I know the psychological studies and aspects of it, but do you see in working with clients when they improve their posture, don't you notice an improvement in their mental emotional health? And even I'm just thinking of the spiritual aspect when your spine is aligned.
Mhm. Oh, I love that. I'm just kind of feeling into that a little bit. From my own personal perspective and experience with clients, I think it's just like with nutrition, you know,
Yeah.
when we're ready to experience ourselves in a different way and to move into that confidence in form, it's like whether it's strength training that gives us that, or whether it's nutrition, or whether it's like a creative process. I experience like when we're ready to see that and experience that within ourselves, then it shows up. And when people are ready to experience that in their body and they're ready to feel that lift and that alignment, it, to me, it just signals that they needed to do it through their body in order to experience that for themselves. That was the path that their soul or their mind, body, spirit needed to go in order to experience that within themselves.
I love that so much. Yeah. 'Cause I even just think when you start to build these mind muscle connections that last outside of your workouts, and now you're showing up talking to your boss on a call with like a stacked spine, even if you maybe don't even feel it mentally, it's like presenting outwardly as more confident.
Yeah.
And you just have like this different kind of energy that you're giving off, even if it's oblivious to you. It's like the
Yeah.
outward world is kind of like, whoa, what's happening here?
So true. Yeah, I
It,
love that. That's a great point. Yeah, I've been so aware of that within myself, like just like that's how I walk, you know.
yes.
So it's yeah, no, I know I love that. You're totally right.
And,
Yes.
and I see it too, even just being around you, it is really innate for you now. But
Mhm.
I've seen the shift like in certain clients and even in myself, especially because so many of us are not sitting as properly hunched over. And we talk a lot about, extending that support outside of the workouts where you might have this 1 hour where you're breathing properly and your joints are stacked, but then you're moving to the computer. And if you're hunched over and you have bad posture and you're not taking walking breaks,
Right.
it's almost like you can't undo that kind of long-term sitting of, your body really molds to the shape that you're in most of the day. So it's
Yeah.
really it's taught me again that intention and awareness. I'm not going to a class just to like sweat as much as possible and be totally checked out and just, try and overtax my body. It's like all of it infuses this intention and awareness that you kind of bring into other aspects of your life. And you're like, now we have clients asking us, how should I like sit at my desk? Do you guys have a chair that you recommend? Or what kind of footwear do you guys use when you work out? Anytime we see people with the huge squishy heels, wearing these running shoes, we're kind of like, can we switch those out possibly? Or, try barefoot, and it changes everything. It's just so cool to kind of weave into that. It's not just in this 1 hour of your day, like it shows up in these other areas of your life.
Yes. Thank you for highlighting that. Thank you for highlighting that, because that's harder for me to feel and experience, right? Because I've been living it for so long.
Yeah.
But that speaks into like repatterning or reprogramming of anything. Like we show up and do a thing for an hour, but every time we do that, it's building the new neural pathways. It's supporting the body to remember how to stack joints, how to contract muscle effectively. And the more frequently do that with awareness and with intention, the more that is going to start to naturally carry over when we're not doing that in that 1 hour. So I really appreciate you bringing that into the conversation, because that is something that I live. So it's harder for me to identify, but it is so accurate.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Lisa, I wanted to ask you one more question here about kind of your transition. So, can you remember any specific like habits or beliefs or patterns that you had to unlearn in order to rewire your body for strength and not just working to the max, working and finding that you need to work out until you're dying on the ground, crying?
Yes. That was the aha moment that you and I had together when we were kind of moving through the nutrition piece. And then we kind of were infusing what is now the second part of Awaken Your Nutrition, which is this even deeper dive into awareness. And I realized that the pattern for me showing up in workouts was not just there, it was everywhere. So it
Mm,
was that mindset of just push as hard as you can, as fast as you can, pedal to the metal, and that will give you better results
mm,
in strength training, workouts, my professional work. It showed up in how I ate food. Literally, it was like eat as much food as you can, as fast as you can, just shovel it down. Partying,
mhm.
drinking alcohol. I was never like a casual drinker. It was like, oh, we're drinking, let's go.
Yeah.
So that was my personality in everything. It's almost like you helped me see, oh my gosh, this is showing up not just in this one area. So I had to unlearn, I had to learn moderation and kind of like, what does moderation feel like when I'm so used to living in these extremes?
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't happen overnight, but when just the unraveling and the aha moment was like shocking. It was almost like a flash. I could see my whole life before me through that one lens and like,
Mhm.
this explains everything. I would wait till literally 2 days before a paper was due to write it. Everything was crunched and then pushed. And it's like, that's the way I got things done. And so just realizing that alone and kind of being aware of it, and then like, oh, actually, not only is that not required, and I might be addicted to the rush of the what's happening to get me to that point is probably a lot of adrenaline. I'm making these windows of waiting or needing to push so hard, and then all this cortisol and adrenaline is releasing. No wonder I could move mountains with that energy. And it's like, okay, how do I kind of like sustain that and kind of pull that through on a more moderate level
Mm.
and still enjoy life and not feel like addicted to this high, if you will.
Totally. I was just going to say, it feels like there may have been an addiction there.
Oh yeah. Oh
Yeah. Wow.
yeah. It would be like, I remember when we did the Lion Street steps and I'm like, are we done? Is this it? And then I'm like, I'm going to go, like, should we go on a hike after this? And you're like, I'm getting a burrito. You're like, what?
That sounds about right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think what you are sharing right now, so many people are going to be able to resonate with, because it's like, it's that all or nothing mindset. And what I love and how it's so cool to have watched each other's journeys in this different way, to see how the all or nothing energy has transformed, and how now you have an extremely different relationship. And it feels like now you can turn that on by choice and then turning it off by choice. And now it's like, I love that you said that your life flashed before your eyes, because yeah, when we have those aha moments, it's like everything is revealed to us where it's been standing in our way and operating unconsciously. And it's like so crazy and exhausting at the same time to see it. You're like, oh my God, okay.
It is. And you're like, you feel it doesn't feel necessarily like self-sabotage, but almost it felt like, God, I've been feeling like I've had to do everything so hard.
Yeah.
Everything has felt so challenging, but actually it was counteractive, counterintuitive, where it was actually giving me something I didn't want.
Yeah.
And how frustrating, part of me is like, oh, I wish, the thing we hear the most often is like, I wish I knew this sooner. And it's like, you know what? We can let that thought roll by, because we're here where we are through all of these incredible life experiences that we've had. And it's served us at various times in our life. And it's like that, like you're saying, that grit, that fire, that drive will always be there, but I just get to control it a little bit more. I'm like, it's
Mhm.
really helpful in work when we're like, you know what, we can make things happen really quickly.
Yeah.
Do we want to stay in that place 24/7? No, we don't.
Yes.
So it's kind of like, it's like honing in your power, and then being okay with and kind of surrendering to, you don't have to work that hard. It doesn't have to be that hard all the time. And
Mhm.
actually your body can kind of like relax into your predominant state of being, of more in your parasympathetic state. That's really been a huge shift for me, of like, okay, let's bring the high octane down to this zone.
Yes, and I've watched that shift for you, and it's been so, so cool. It's been so cool. And that translates for so many women and
Yeah.
men, but for so many women, because we're working with this demographic of women who are moving from perimenopause into menopause. And if you guys can work to understand regulating your nervous system and calming down a little bit and doing these workouts and focusing on strength that of course supports bone density and muscle growth and reducing injury into our later years, like this stuff is going to really change the trajectory of your life as you move forward. And yeah, it's just so important.
Yeah, it's
So,
the I love that muscle mass is becoming less about aesthetics and more about longevity, and making that transition for women, through perimenopause and later, less symptomatic. It's going to protect you in older age. It's very cool to witness that kind of shift in the why,
mm,
because it changes the practice from something, oh, I have to do, and more like, I get to do this, and to
yes.
do it in the power of community, which Awaken Your Strength is going to provide, is the best part. So you get to do it together under your guidance.
That part is so amazing, because when we get access to watch other people's movement patterns, even if it's different than ours, we're going to get a greater perspective of how our body moves in space and how it does or doesn't move in space, right? Just like with our group containers, every single person that is sharing in their own health and wellness journey, every single time we are getting a bigger perspective of the whole. And what's really cool about this, and why I wanted to create Awaken Your Strength in such a way, is because we're going to be able to not only provide personal feedback, but also do it in a group setting in these 1.5 hour weekly form salons, is how I'm calling them, where we can actually go down deep into these concepts. And then you can feel the concepts in the weekly workouts. And then you can have the education that is supporting those concepts. So we're not only applying it practically, we're discussing it together as a group. You get to feel it in your body with movement, and then you get to learn it logically through the course. And that's really how we do all of our processes, right? We're like doing the practical, the educational, and helping the why to be able to get pacified. The mind gets to feel safe understanding what it's learning, and then to be able to do it in a group where you get to like have fun in the process. And so yeah, I'm just really, really excited.
I think my favorite part about it too is that, even for our current clients, if you're listening and you feel like, oh, I'm already doing the workouts, y'all, this is the next level. Like getting access to Shannon Morse, looking at your form, honestly, it's been the greatest gift to my training. And I'm just so grateful. I still think a lot of our clients will say it too. I can hear your voice in my head when I'm doing exercises, roll the shoulders back and down and rib cage down and it's ingrained now. And just little, it's like, training with you in person is obviously the ultimate, but what you're able to create by looking at people's form through Zoom is magic and life changing. And we've talked about that too. You're like, I can give a tip or one slight adjustment to someone who's been training for 20 years, whatever it is, and it will change the trajectory of their muscle definition, whether or not they have pain in this area. Like it could change everything. So that's the piece I'm so excited about, and that I want to make sure everybody knows, is that they get that hands-on feedback from you. It's invaluable.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you, Lise, which I'm really excited about because I love that part. I love getting those one little two tweaks that will change so many things for that person's movement and like injury prevention, especially. Okay, you guys. Well, thank you so much for listening. Thank you for joining. If you are interested in Awaken Your Strength, you can go to thegreendoorlife.com/strength and see the programming options. We start this current rendition of Awaken Your Strength in May, and we will be running group cohorts of this. If you listen to this sometime in the future and that has changed slightly, just make sure to kind of check back in with us. If you have any questions, you can email us at manifest@thegreendoorlife.com. Thank you, Lise. This was so fun, of course. And thank you everyone for listening, and we will see you next time.